There are two kinds of superhero movies: the ones you forget a week later, and the ones that quietly change the comic book market. And I don't think Supergirl falls into that second category as a movie overall, guys. I did see it. I saw it right when it came out. I'm a DC fan. I was very excited for this movie. Obviously, I loved the original Superman from 2025 with James Gunn, but I do think it has the potential to change the market for one comic book, and that's what I want to talk about today. While I don't think that the movie is anywhere near James Gunn's Superman, I still think it's a movie worth watching. If I had to score it right now today, I'd probably land somewhere around 6.5, maybe 7 out of 10. It's a perfectly watchable movie. It's got Gunn's signature all over it, but it never quite reaches the emotional highs or excitement that Superman delivered, at least in my opinion. Now, before we dive into the comic market implications for this, I do want to talk about what I liked. Without question, Milly Alcock was the right choice to play Supergirl. She brings an edge to the character that feels different, and honestly, I think that's what Supergirl needs. I think that's what this character needs, because Clark Kent is generally optimistic, hopeful, steady. Kara Zor-El has always carried a little bit more anger, a little more trauma, and a little more emotional weight because she actually remembers Krypton. She's experienced loss differently than Clark Kent has, and Millie captures that really, really well. So that was a high point for sure. And she also never feels like she's trying to imitate Superman. She generally feels like her own character. That's probably the biggest success of the movie. I walked out of the theater believing that this version has room to grow throughout the new DC universe, and I think audiences are going to connect with her even if they don't absolutely love every part of this film. And depending on where the DCU goes, we may come to realize sometime down the road why Gunn made this movie the way that he made it. Now, where the movie starts to lose me and other people a little bit that you can see in online reviews is that Krem was just not a good villain. Now, that's not necessarily an indictment on the performance itself as much as it is the character. I mean, throughout the movie, I kept waiting for Krem to be a little more memorable, intimidating, and it just never really happened, for me at least. Every great superhero movie usually has a villain that people continue talking about after they leave the theater, and that wasn't the case. I mean, when you think about characters like the Joker or Thanos or General Zod, I mean, even some of Spider-Man's villains, whether you hate them or you love them, you know who they are, they stay with you. Krem does not reach that level. And from a comic collecting standpoint, I don't see this movie creating any demand really for comics featuring Krem either. I mean, sometimes a great film introduces audiences to an obscure character and suddenly collectors begin chasing first appearances or stuff with that character. I don't think that's going to happen here. If anything, people are going to leave remembering Supergirl herself, not necessarily the villain. Now, one thing I really appreciated about this movie is that it wasn't trying to be Superman all over again either. It does have a completely different personality. James Gunn's Superman felt larger than life. I mean, there were major superheroes in that movie. You had Green Lantern, Mr. Terrific. It felt like a very expansive world. This movie scales things back a bit. The cast feels smaller. The story feels a little bit more focused. The soundtrack has a different personality. I mean, even visually, the movie carries a darker atmosphere. It's not gloomy. I'm not saying that it is, but it's definitely less bright and hopeful than Superman was. Now, if the DC universe is going to succeed long term, then every movie shouldn't feel identical. Characters should have their own identities. Batman shouldn't feel like Superman and vice versa. This movie at least succeeds in carving out its own atmosphere. I will say that. Now, was that atmosphere always enough to elevate the story? Not to me. There were moments where, a little more urgency, a little more emotional payoff, but I still appreciated that it wasn't repeating what came before. It just didn't have the same energy that I thought it was going to have. So I do want to talk about what was probably my favorite surprise of the movie, which was Lobo. I mean, seeing Jason Momoa finally appear as Lobo was just fun. I mean, it was right. He was perfectly cast. It just felt like the right moment for him. The attitude, the confidence, the humor. It felt very natural. And Lobo has always been one of DC's most entertaining anti-heroes because he never really fits neatly into the traditional superhero mold. If you paid any attention to his story arcs, he's loud, he's unpredictable, he's violent, sarcastic, and honestly, Momoa looks like he's having a great time playing him. So even if his screen time wasn't enormous, his presence in the movie left an impression. And if DC decides to build on that character in future projects, I think collectors are going to continue paying attention to Lobo books because the potential is definitely there. Now, from a collecting perspective, let's get to the question that everybody cares about. Does this movie move Action 252? Now, personally, I think it does. Not because the movie's a masterpiece, I'm already telling you that it isn't. Not because it reinvents superhero films, not because it's better than Superman, it isn't any of those things. But it's because every successful introduction of a major DC character tends to remind collectors why that character matters historically. Action 252 is still the first appearance of Supergirl. That fact hasn't changed. And every new audience introduced to the character eventually starts asking the same question. Where did she come from? Where did she appear? That's how first appearances gain long-term strength. Not every buyer immediately runs out to purchase the book after opening weekend. Instead, awareness slowly builds. Collectors who weren't previously interested begin looking around. Existing collectors become less willing to sell. Demand slowly broadens. And over time, truly important first appearances generally benefit. That's why I still think Action 252 comes out ahead after this movie is over. Maybe not overnight, maybe not dramatically. But I do think it's going to help the book. Now, one thing I always remind collectors is that movies don't necessarily have to be incredible to positively affect comic books. Sometimes simply putting a character back into mainstream conversation is enough. People remember why they like them. New fans discover them. Older fans revisit them. And the first appearance almost always receives renewed attention. I think that's exactly what happens here. So where do I ultimately land on it? I enjoyed it. I didn't love it. I thought Milly Alcock was excellent, perfect for the role. I thought Momoa's Lobo was a lot of fun. And I appreciated that the movie had its own identity instead of trying to duplicate Superman. I wasn't particularly impressed by Krem as the central villain. And overall, I'd comfortably rate it somewhere between 6.5 and 7 out of 10. It's absolutely worth seeing if you're a DC fan. Just don't go in expecting another Superman because that's not what this is. Go in expecting a different corner of the DC universe, one that's a little darker and a little slower, and one that still manages to make Action 252 a book worth paying attention to as the new DC universe continues to grow. Thanks for listening to the Slabbed Portfolios podcast. Make sure you're subscribed to the channel where we break down comics, collectibles, and market psychology so you can collect smarter and avoid costly mistakes. And I will see you guys next time.